Today is a very special day. It is the 15th year anniversary of the election of the first black president of the United States of America, Barack Hussein Obama. I want to take some time and talk about his historic election and presidency. Stay with me. Hello, everybody. This is Attorney Augustus Corbett, a.k.a. the Minister of Justice, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. And each and every week, we bring you a legal analysis of some trending story having to do with politics, policies, personalities, or pop culture to empower the African-American community with the ability to nullify systemic racism and to defy an unjust legal system. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell so that you'll get notified every time we upload one of these banging videos. So as I said in the opener, today for a lot of Americans is a very special day. Many Americans may have forgotten, but today is the 15th year anniversary of the election of Barack Hussein Obama. Well, for me, it's very, very special. It was a transformative day. I remember exactly where I was when Katie Couric, who was the anchor, one of the anchors for NBC, and she made the announcement that Obama had been elected the first black president of the United States of America. I went outside my house, I'll never forget it, and I began to weep. And all I could think about were my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents. In fact, my maternal great-great-grandfather, his name was Thomas Williams. He was enslaved on the Williams plantation in a little small part of North Carolina called Rockfish, the town of Rockfish. My great-great-grandfather, Thomas Williams, and his wife, Emily Williams, could have never imagined, as they stood out there in those slave fields and did backbreaking work, no matter how hot or cold it was. They could not imagine, I don't think, that the day would come where their great-great-grandson would see the day where a black man and black woman would take residency in the White House of the United States of America, the very first black president and the very first black first family. Wow. But God did it. God did it. God made it happen because forces were aligned against Obama and the African American community as far back as 1619. That was supposed to never happen. Obama was supposed to never, ever become the president of this country. And we know that many, 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 many white people were profoundly disturbed that this black man had become the president of this country. And we had Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader at that time, who admitted and laughed because he set as his legislative goal to make Obama a failed president. No matter what happened to the country, Mitch McConnell and his comrades made it their business. Again, no matter how bad it may hurt the country, they were determined to see this black man fail as the first black president of this country. Mitch McConnell, a descendant of slave plantation owners. So we can see this runs deep in his blood. Deep in his blood. But not just him. Many others who currently sit in Congress are deeply, deeply committed to the Confederacy and white supremacy. But by God's help, we broke through and we elected a black man to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And it was one of the, again, happiest days of my life. I am so happy that I can look back and say that I voted for him, that I was on the right side of history. Now, let me tell you, I took a lot of flack because I have a lot of conservative friends who felt like it was selling out to the liberal, progressive wing of this country to vote for Obama because he is a liberal, he is progressive. Some would even describe him as a leftist. And so for me, who is a committed Christian and a minister, who is ideologically right of center, to vote for Obama caused a lot of my friends, African-American friends, to think that I had absolutely lost my mind because in their minds, that spelled the end of the country. To see this liberal, this progressive, again, what they would describe as leftists, become the president of the country. Never mind the fact that the country had been led by white supremacists, slave owners, and all of that. Those people are not immoral as Obama is in their opinion. So someone could certainly be a slave owner, enslave people and molest and rape their daughters and their wives. That's not as immoral as Obama, who supports gay marriage and abortion. Now, let me say this. I certainly disagree with Obama on those two positions. I am absolutely pro-life and I am pro-traditional marriage and have been for many years. But I voted for Republicans that I disagreed with. So why couldn't I vote for this African-American man who, on all other points, was well qualified to take the position of president of this country? We're talking about an African-American man who is a confessing Christian, who has been faithful to his wife and his children, who is well educated, a Harvard-trained constitutional lawyer, who had served in the state Senate in Illinois and had served as a senator for Illinois, a man who has compassion for the community, having been out there and done community organizing work. It was an honor, quite frankly, to vote for a man, an African-American man, with those qualifications. Again, I disagreed strongly with Mr. Obama on those two issues and probably a couple of more. And I was one of his most fierce critics. And that's something that a whole lot of folks who voted for Trump cannot and will not say, that they will disagree with and did disagree with Trump on the many, 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 many things that he did to harm this country. But I can say that because I'm not an Obama sycophant. I am happy that he served in that office for 2 terms, was elected and reelected. But when it was necessary to criticize him and challenge and critique his decisions and policies, I did so. But again, I'm just so happy that I can look back and say that I took part in this historic moment. Now, what I'd like to do here is, first of all, let's bring him and the first family up of that day. On November 4th, 2008, Barack Hussein Obama became the first African-American president. Again, that was a huge day. A huge day. A huge, huge, huge day. Black Americans had gone through so much unspeakable indignities and oppression and injustices. I cannot describe them to you. And not only did my ancestors never probably envision the day that this would happen, but so many African Americans. Because we know that even after the country abolished slavery after the Civil War, we know then Jim Crow took root, black code laws, sharecropping, and the whole works. And even today, despite the progress that this nation has made, there is still systemic racism that undermines the progress, further progress, full equality of the African American community. So the work is still very much needed. But again, we're going to take this time today to celebrate the 15th year anniversary of this great man, Now, let me talk about some of his major accomplishments. So, first, Obama passed healthcare reform. He passed a stimulus package that essentially saved the country. Some of you may be too young to remember, but when Obama became president, the country was right at the point of having an economic meltdown. I can remember the Secretary of Commerce, I think his name was Paulson, coming on TV on a Thursday night and essentially saying if Congress does not authorize X amount of dollars, the country by tomorrow this time would have failed economically. In other words, defaulted. I remember that like it was yesterday. And Obama became president at that very trying time and saved this country. And let me also go back for a moment to the fact that he passed healthcare reform. It took him several years to do that. And they fought him, just like I told you earlier. Mitch McConnell and the GOP fought Obama no matter how great this type of program would be for millions and millions and millions of Americans, including Republicans. They did not want him to receive credit for this. And so not only did they fight it then, they have been fighting it ever since. But it has become, at this point, a part of the American fabric. Millions of people depend on Obamacare. It's what we call it. It's really the Affordable Care Act, but we commonly call it Obamacare. Many people depend on this for their health insurance. So we are very grateful to Mr. Obama for this health care reform bill that he got passed. And again, the stimulus package, some people disagreed with it, but it, again, I think we can say safely that it saved the country from economic disaster. But he also passed Wall Street reform because it was a lot of the Wall Street people who put the country in economic perils in the first place. You remember the housing industry basically tanked. People were able to buy houses with bad credit and with even low incomes were able to buy $1 million house, and all that came crashing down. Mr. Obama put things in place to prevent that from happening in the future. He also saved the auto industry. If you recall, several of the big three were in a very bad situation. And Obama was able to get money to them that saved the industry, and that money was paid back. They paid that money back. He also created millions of jobs during that period. When he took over as president, the country was bleeding millions of jobs, at least hundreds of thousands of jobs. And he came over with his policies, with this stimulus package and so forth. And then the job situation turned around and he began creating millions of jobs as president. He also passed the Fair Sentencing Act, which is critical because people who possess crack cocaine receive sentences that were 100 times longer than people who possess powder cocaine. Most of the people who were convicted of crack were African American people, whereas most of the people who were convicted and sentenced for powder cocaine are white people. So it was just an obvious, blatant example of systemic racism. He dealt with that. He also ended the Iraq War. That was really, 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 really big, right? To bring our troops home, to get them out of the Middle East as much as possible so we can use those resources for problems we have here at home. And especially when we went to war in the first place, based on this false notion that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. We remember all of that. He also gave the approval to kill Osama bin Laden. That was huge. And it took a lot of guts on his part, because had that gone wrong and had SEAL teams and soldiers, Marines, etc., been killed as a result of his approving that endeavor, he would have been harshly criticized. So under his leadership, Osama bin Laden was killed. He saved the banking industry, just like I talked about the auto industry. He reformed the education department, which is real big in my mind because education is the step up or the step ladder to a better future for African American people. Yet the education department, I wrote a book on this, in fact, is plagued with systemic racism, especially against African American males. And he brought about reform. That's something that I personally appreciate. He passed legislation to bring about equality for women. When he took office, women were making about 70 cents on every dollar that a man made, and he fixed that. He increased pay for veterans. So this whole notion that he was anti-military is false. He helped lead the charge to increase pay for our service people, which is important to me because I am a military veteran. He passed legislation to protect the environment. And at that time, and even today, the GOP pretty much dismisses how important our environment is. But he jumped on that bandwagon and made that a priority of his administration 15 years ago. I appreciate that. He approved the payment for Black farmers. That is huge. Here's why. Land loss in the African American community, especially amongst Black farmers, is just reprehensible. We own a fraction of the land we once owned early in the 20th century, and we lost it due to a lot of discrimination by the federal government. And so Black farmers that I know actually sued the government and were awarded several $billions, which really doesn't even cover the loss. But even though it didn't cover the loss, the government refused to pay until Obama came along and forced the government to pay. And last of all, he had no scandals, not one, not even in his administration, none involving him directly and none involving all the people that worked for him for 8 years, not one scandal. And how big that was, because that's what White said. He's going to ruin the country. There's going to be scandal after scandal after scandal. And there wasn't one, not one. He deserves a huge round of applause for that. Huge round of applause. And you really can appreciate the fact that Mr. Obama had no scandals when you think about who succeeded him in the White House. Donald Trump, who today is facing 4 indictments and almost 100 different charges. Now, Mr. Trump's supporters will say, yeah, the Democrats are targeting him. Well, he must have given them something to target, because if you think about Obama, not once was he impeached. Not once was he charged with anything. And this despite the fact that they had teams of people dedicated to finding anything on him. But he gave them nothing that they could target. So this whole notion that Democrats are just targeting Trump, who is an innocent person, and he's presumed innocent, don't misunderstand me. I am a criminal defense lawyer, and he is definitely presumed innocent. But do not say that he's being targeted. No one was targeted like Obama. The hate, the vitriol that man and his wife and children experienced in this country, a country that is committed to the Confederacy, to see that black man in office. In fact, it was because of his election and re-election that a man like Trump could even become president with all his issues. Donald Trump, in other words, is basically payback, basically white backlash for the election of Obama and re-election. So if anybody was targeted, it was Obama. But they couldn't find anything. Because again, he's a man of principle and character and morality. And so those are some of the reasons why I celebrate Barack Hussein Obama, and I wanted to take this opportunity to remind us of his presidency. Now, in closing, we have a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson from Louisiana. There are several main things that I want to talk about regarding Mr. Johnson. 1, he's an election denier. 2, he is a part of MAGA. And 3, this is going to sound weird, let me explain. And 3, he is a really dedicated Christian. Now, I am a minister. I am a real dedicated Christian. Why does it concern me that Mr. Johnson is a Christian? Here's why. The people who enslaved my ancestors were largely white Christians. All we ever hear about in this country is that it is a Christian nation. Frederick Douglass, in one of his books, The Autobiography of Frederick Douglass, talks about how the most fervent Christian during slavery were the meanest, were the ones who were most committed to enslaving African Americans. No, I do not assume that just because Mr. Johnson is a committed, confessing Christian, that he's someone who will be fair and just, etc. No. Mr. Johnson even has a black adopted child. And I heard him give an interview. He said that his black son experiences things that his white son doesn't. And Sean Hannity asked him, do you think that's the result of systemic racism? And he said no. That right there showed me, that told me that he's not going to say anything to alienate, to offend his white supporters. He is what I call white first. A Christian, yes, but white first. I'm writing a book on that. White first. Those are Christians who put their race, their privilege, and their power as white above the cross of Christ. Otherwise, if that's not true, why do 88% of white evangelicals support Trump to this day, despite all his flaws? Why is it that white evangelicals so strongly supported, again, slavery and Jim Crow? How can that be? The Bible very clearly says, love thy neighbor as thyself. If you don't want to be enslaved, don't enslave others. So how is it that white evangelicals can support a man like Trump, can support slavery, Jim Crow, systemic racism, and still be committed Christians? So it really concerns me that he is a confessing Christian. Now, I'm not judging him. I'm just saying I have concerns. Maybe he'll be different. Maybe he'll be different. Maybe he will not be like the white Christians who fought to preserve the institution of slavery. Maybe he won't be like the Southern Baptist Convention that broke away from their Baptist brothers to preserve the institution of slavery, like the Presbyterian and the Methodists. Maybe he won't be like those. Maybe he won't be like those white evangelical Christians that opposed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Maybe he won't be like that. I don't know. We'll see. Until then, yes, I have my concerns. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I wanted to celebrate, again, the 15th anniversary of Barack Hussein Obama becoming the first Black elected president and having, again, this African-American, this beautiful African-American woman, Mrs. Obama, and their two wonderful children in the White House for 8 years. Mrs. Obama has spoken a lot about how much they went through and just how difficult it was being the first family of this country, but God brought them through. They did it very, very, very well, and I just applaud them, that whole family. I applaud them. I am grateful to them, and I honor them. Absolutely. Okay? All right, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you for tuning in. And once again, I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers, and we bring you one of these legal analysis on some trending issue having to do with politics, policies, personalities of pop culture to empower the African-American community with the information it needs to nullify systemic racism and to defy an unjust legal system. Go ahead and subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell. Until the next time, you be good. Peace.